Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to What You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at a favorite of mine from Vacheron Constantin. This is the Vacheron Constantin Patrimony Power Reserve, reference 47200, 36 millimeters in diameter, rendered in 18 karat white gold. Now, this reference was introduced during the 90s as part of the Le Historique collection, and during the early 2000s it received the stunning and dramatic vertically guilloche dial that you see here. And this is one where the iPhone might give you a taste, but if you want the full meal, you really have to devour it on our website, What You Want, in our high-resolution studio images, because the phone just isn't going to do the dial of this beauty justice. Now, I want to focus first on the wrist impression, because with a dress watch, elegance is paramount, but comfort's important as well. And you can see this 36 millimeter watch has large, broad, really full-bodied lugs. Lugs often get lost in the shuffle with larger watches today because as the case grows larger and larger, watchmakers have to cut back the lugs more and more. Watches have grown dramatically, but human wrists haven't, and so something has to give. With a more traditionally sized watch like this 36 millimeter, you really get to accentuate the lugs as a watch designer, draw them out, create special details that add character to the watch that mirror other styling elements. And here you can see that on my wrist, which is 6 1/3 inches in circumference, 16 centimeters, the watch sits nice and flat, being only 12 millimeters thick. You can see that there's absolutely no overlap of my wrist by the ends of the lugs. And when I talk about the corresponding details between the lugs and the case, you can see the steps of those lugs echo the step of the bezel itself. And there's really a aesthetic parallelism there that is quite fulfilling and quite satisfying from the standpoint of the owner. It makes the watch seem all of a piece, like it was conceived by one man, designed with a singular vision. Really quite well done. Now the strap, which is square section alligator, is very supple. It's bolstered to give it a little bit of body and resilience, but at the same time its underside is buttery and it conforms to my wrist with very little resistance. Likewise, I like the inclusion of a Maltese cross style corresponding white gold pin buckle, because the pin buckle, in addition to being more traditional and better suited to this type of watch, allows for easy sizing of the strap. Bracelets, while ultimately very versatile, durable, and they can be handsome when integrated with the case nicely, they're also a bit cumbersome. They add some unnecessary weight at times, and they can be difficult to size easily. They can also be difficult to resize if your wrist expands or contracts during activity, hot weather, cold weather. So on a watch like this, with a brilliant silver dial, a white metal case, the black strap is beautiful aesthetically for the sake of contrast, and an outstanding ergonomic winner. Now the dial is the main event on this watch. As engaging as the case is, the dial is the centerpiece. I mentioned earlier that there have been a couple of different versions of this dial. All of them are well suited to Vacheron's mission as a supplier of dress watches par excellence, but the bottom line is that this particular version with the vertical guilloche has a dramatic tension to it and outstanding detailing that really just draws the eye from 12 to 6 along this array of complications. Now the caliber is known as Vacheron 1127. It's based on the Jaeger-LeCoultre caliber 928 Reserve de Marche, and you can see how all of the complications are scattered about the cannon pinion, the junction of the foy hands at center, and they really incorporate a little bit of the calculated asymmetry that we saw on the last of the great 20th century pocket watches in the early 20th century. Vacheron is a company that loves to reference history and has a real respect for tradition. So this traditionalist arrangement of the radial date, the power reserve, and the small seconds around the hands with the marquee right here at 9 o'clock, it's both evocative and beautifully rendered. Each of these elements is beautifully detailed, from the radial date with its polished chapter ring to the small seconds with a smaller version of the same, to the gorgeous white gold foy hand and applied white gold power reserve scale of the power reserve indicator. Every part of this dial is lovingly crafted. Now there is a little bit of a sunken guilloche effect for each subdial, so each one is on a slightly different plane than the main dial, and that just adds to the visual interest. Sinking them in adds contrast, and featuring a matte, smooth finish in the midst of all this vertical striation Again, it's just a little bit of articulation, a little bit of a visual tick that adds some dissonance and keeps the mind occupied. It beguiles the observer, and that's what this calculated asymmetry achieves. You can see there's a little bit of postmodernism, the fitment not of Roman numerals at the four corners, but here at 12, at 4, and at 8, with diamond polished, faceted, square indices at the other stations of the hours. This watch has a lot going for it aesthetically, and you can see there are more little visual ticks because each of the subdials has its own style of hand. Right here, foy, right here, baton, and right here, a sort of hybrid of the two. Vacheron spent a lot of time on this dial, and while I normally advocate owners of fine watches taking the loop to the movement to get the most out of the movements, in this case, this reference 47200 Vacheron Patrimony Power Reserve deserves to be looped on both sides, such as the level of detail and the depth of design consideration, a real masterpiece from this side. But turning it over, there's no disappointment on the case back. The bottom line is that this Vacheron Constantin caliber 1127 comes from a great tradition. Now, since the 19th century, Jaeger-LeCoultre and Vacheron Constantin, which in practical terms are not located far away at all, have been linked with the Le Sentier firm supplying the Geneva haute de gamme manufacturer with movements, complications, and finished elements. Now, JLC, since the 1950s even, has supplied Vacheron with movement bases on which Vacheron then creates a finishing masterpiece. With the JLC caliber 928 as its canvas, Vacheron creates the 1127. You can see the linear Côte de Genève on the winding mass, the 21 karat gold winding mass. You can see corresponding Côte de Genève on the bridge of the winding system. On the base plate, there's a gorgeous, tight and even perlage and abundant heat-blued screws. Now, the JLC manufacture provenance, the degree of engineering associated with the watchmaker's watchmaker, is evident throughout. JLC's built movements for Patek Philippe, Bulgari, Cartier, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron Constantin. Basically, anyone who's anyone has used a JLC movement in the past, but the best of the best improve the movements and finish them to their in-house standards, and Vacheron does just that. You can see the characteristic JLC elements, including the famous jeweled reversing wheels right there, this little rocker system that reverses the winding to keep the bidirectional winder winding the mainspring barrel in a single direction. It ensures that there's no unweighted freewheeling in either direction, as there can be on some unidirectional winders. This watch is very smooth on the wrist. Likewise, the balance features a Triovis micro-adjustment system for very fine tuning of the watch. This watch, because of the caliber of that underlying JLC engineering, can be tuned to meet COSC specs, which is outstanding but not surprising, given that the same movement at the Jaeger-LeCoultre manufacturer meets their demanding 1,000 hours in-house test. An outstanding combination of Vacheron finishing and Jaeger-LeCoultre engineering. It's the best of both. Now, this Vacheron Constantin Patrimony Power Reserve, reference 47200, is a 100% complete luxury watch set. Everything that you would have received with this watch when it was new in the early 2000s as the last of the vertically guilloched Vacheron 47200s comes with it now. The boxes, the technical manuals, the documents of provenance, but also some of the goodies like the leather wallet to accommodate all of the paperwork that comes with the watch. Vacheron Constantin branded. You can carry it around and use it to store other things if you like. There is an accessory strap that comes with this watch, the original pusher corrector tool for the date, also the Vacheron Constantin polishing cloth. This watch isn't the full set. If you wanted to get started with a like-new Vacheron Constantin Patrimony Power Reserve with all of the original toys as delivered from the boutique, then this Vacheron Constantin Patrimony Power Reserve 36mm in 18 karat white gold may just be the watch you want.